Hello and welcome to the Gifted Podcast. I am your host, Neeraj Mulani, and in the Gifted Podcast, I speak with elite athletes as we try to challenge the misconception that athletes are just some people who are talented or gifted with special abilities at birth. Every week, I am joined by an elite athlete as we try to break down what it truly takes and means to be an athlete. If you're an aspiring athlete or just a casual sports fan, you will definitely enjoy this podcast as I get candid with athletes about their journey, their achievements, moments of heartbreak, and most importantly, moments of hard work and perseverance. Guys, I'm happy to share that the Gifted podcast is now sponsored by Zenkai Sports, the new disruptor in the performance apparel world. And they have come up with a great offer for the listeners of this podcast. So, stick around till the end and find out about this exciting offer. In today's episode, I welcome this show's first ever professional footballer as a guest, and what an amazing guest I have for you guys. It is PSG women's goalkeeper Arianna Criscione. Arianna has one of the most unique profiles in football as she has two parallel contracts with PSG, one as a goalkeeper and another one as a sponsorship manager. In this episode, we talk about Arianna's successful career across multiple countries and how it could all culminate in a fairy tale ending for her career on Friday, 4th June 2021, when PSG take on Dijon and could win their first league title ever with a win. So, without further ado, let's get straight to it. Welcome, Arianna, to the Gifted Podcast. We're really excited to have you today. You're the first footballer. I'm really excited to know more about your journey. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to see where this conversation will go.
It's a real pleasure. And the minute that I saw your profile on LinkedIn, it was very apparent that you have a very unique profile in terms of the work that you're doing with PSG, not just as a player, but as a professional as well. So I was very keen to understand how did that role come about, especially knowing that you call it your Disney story.
So it's a crazy story, and I won't bog you down with too many details, but basically, I've always been a football player. I started playing at a young age, and obviously in the States, it's pretty important and popular for us to play through university. So I got my degree in university, and it was really important for my parents that I got my degree before I went pro. And then I came over to Europe and I went pro, and while my career was continuing, I was always doing stuff on the side, kind of a huge entrepreneurial spirit. It definitely runs in my family. My dad is an entrepreneur. My sister is an entrepreneur. And because of that, I always had some side hustle or something going on. One, for necessity, because the clubs didn't always pay us on time or pay us enough. And two, just because I don't like to be bored and sit around doing nothing. But that also led me to going back to school and getting a master's in football business while I was playing here in France. And then, long story short, I ended up on a fateful flight sitting next to the sporting director of Paris Saint-Germain. And by the end of the flight, I talked myself into two contracts. One, playing for the club as one of our backup goalkeepers, and two, leading the women's sponsorship team and trying to find standalone sponsors for our women's team and working on other women's football development projects.
Right. And I often like to discuss the athlete's transition from sports to their professional career, but knowing that you have such a unique role that you'd be looking after two things at the same time, I was keen to understand how do you juggle these two roles at the same time?
I mean, even though most athletes won't tell you, we do have quite a bit of extra time. Clearly, my focus isn't on taking over a starting position or so focused on my athletic endeavors anymore. I'm kind of at the end of my career. We definitely still have an hour or two a day that we can dedicate to hobbies or to learning something or to mastering a different craft. And so I've just taken more of my extra time and using it to search out the extra sponsors, using it to go back to school. I just finished a Harvard program, and now I'm currently doing the diploma in club management for FIFA. So my time is really split up, and I just have to organize really well and, make sure I'm using my Outlook calendar all the time and not crisscrossing things. But yeah, I think we as humans have more time than we think. And especially this past year with COVID, I had lots of time to make sure I was studying and learning and doing all the things I needed to be doing. So I don't know. I just find time to do stuff.
Right. And with this unique role as the sponsorship manager for the women's team, since you're already at the forefront talking to the brands, trying to sell the women's football as a product, I wanted to know what are the thoughts of the brand on this economic divide between the men's and women's football? And more importantly, what are your thoughts on this economic divide?
It depends on the brand. So every brand is different. So you can't just categorize all brands as a brand. Like every brand has a different motive for wanting to sponsor a team, whether that's the men's team or the women's team, has a different financial objective that they want to use or that they need to hit. So there's a lot of really unique and intricate factors that go into sponsorships that a lot of people don't realize. It's not normally like a cookie cutter. This is package A, this is package B, this is package C, and it costs this price. And you just come and you pick your package and you pay, and that's it. It's not how it works at all. So that's really difficult.
Right. So, what would you say is the brand's receptibility or the brand's interest to sponsoring the women's sports, and what kind of customization would you be doing for these, brands to align with women's football when you do try and approach them?
Well, women's football is a different product altogether from the men's team. We're very unique, and the actual individual women on the team are unique, and they all have their own special story. And a lot of them have a unique story, like myself, or even more unique and more exciting. A lot of them do things on the side. A lot of them have different entrepreneurial endeavors. A lot of them go back to school or are currently in school. One girl on my team will become a doctor. She'll be a surgeon. So there's definitely unique stories there. That's a lot different normally than most men's team. And the women's teamers are also more receptive and interested and excited to work with the brands. And they usually will give more of their time, and they're more authentic when they're there. It's not just a job. They come up, they're there for the 20 minutes that brand is allotted, and then they go away. The women come and they really want to engage with the brand, and they want to engage with the sponsors, and they want the product to turn out to be good. So if it takes a little longer, they're willing to put in the time and the effort because they want that product and this relationship to go well. But also just overall for women's football, we need the brand, and so it's important for what we do with them to go well.
Right. And with this context, knowing that the focus is on raising the women's game, raising the profile of the women's game as it rightly should be, do you get any helping hand from the men's team, especially knowing that the clout that they have in the media right now?
So we have a lot of the same people that work on both the men's and the women's team. So it's not just going to the men's team and getting help. Like the people that work on the men's team also work for the women's team, also work for our handball team, also work for our judo team.
Do you get any additional support from the players of the men's team to boost the profile as we rightly should be?
Like we've had some of the male players who are interested in our games come to our games and support us at our games. Some of our players like to go to the men's games. Some of our players don't like to go to the men's games. So I think that works on both sides of the coin. And I think our men's team is happy that they have an important and a strong team. So I guess overall, yes, we have the support of our men's team.
Right. And you've recently announced your retirement, and you could possibly be hanging your gloves up on a high with the league title on 5th June. Without getting too ahead of ourselves, are there any special plans if and when you win the title?
Oh, no, I don't know. Break open the champagne and start spraying everybody down. That's for sure going to happen. Other than that, no, just to really revel in the moment and not let it go too quickly, and just really take it all in. And it's going to be my last. So this Friday will be my last game ever with any team. Fingers crossed and everything goes well the way it should. We will be making history and bringing home the title to Paris for the very first time. Ooh, just gives me chills thinking about it. I'm so excited. But yeah, I'm sure the club has some things planned and things like that. I will be maybe going and trying to find some goodies that I will be busting out. I don't know. Some people are talking about certain flags to be worn, but I don't know. I need a day or two to decompress from yesterday's match, and then I'll get focused on what's going to happen on Friday.
Right. And this league title could be bittersweet, knowing that you had a potentially career threatening injury in Saint Etienne, your previous club, where you had not one but five injuries at the same time, tearing your ACL, MCL, PCL, and both meniscus at the same time. What was going through your mind when you heard of this injury, the severe injury?
I mean, we knew it was bad. So when we got the official diagnosis, I mean, that was so long. That was over 5 years, no more, 6 years ago. So I think, yeah, I was just like, oh, shit. I don't know. It was a lot. It was a lot to take in a foreign country. And I think the biggest thing that I was scared about actually was paying for it all, and how I was going to be able to pay for my surgery and my rehab and trying to get back on the field, because technically my contract was over before the scheduled surgery date. But luckily Saint Etienne was amazing, and they took really good care of me, and they made sure I got all of the medical attention that I needed, much longer than was necessary, or much longer than they contractually had to. So that was amazing. And then it was just kind of one day at a time and controlling the things that I controlled. I was really focused on what I could do to make sure that I could get better. So I was really focused on what I was eating. I was focused on trying to work out. by doing the arm bike. I was focused on not gaining weight. I was focused on taking care of my mental health. I was extremely lucky that my family is really supportive. My mom ended up stopping work and moving to France to help take care of me. So, yeah, it was definitely a family affair.
And in one of the other interviews that I heard of you, you ended up finding a silver lining in this injury as well when you said that it's good that you had all the five injuries happen at the same time rather than spacing it out. What does it take to build a positive perspective like that, as not just as an athlete but as a human being?
I mean, for me, it everybody around me said I was amazing and like what I was able to do. Me at the time, it was no choice. Like I had a massive cast on my leg. I couldn't move my leg. So if I wanted to be able to move my leg, I had to do everything they told me and I had to do it well and I had to do it right. And I didn't see the point in wallowing in my sorrow. Don't get me wrong. There was a couple times where I just had a really bad day. But for the most part, it was just one foot in front of the other, one step in front of the other, small victories of getting strength back or being able to bend my knee and just focusing on, okay, what can I do today? Whatever happens tomorrow will be tomorrow, but what can I do today to put myself in the best place to make tomorrow better? And that's all I did, was just super focus on all these really small things and just make sure I stayed on track.
Right. And what sort of mental strength do you think you need to come back from an injury like this? And how do you train for it? Like you mentioned that you're trying to keep your mental well-being in check, but what are the nitty-gritties of, having that mental well-being in check?
For me, it's a lot of making lists and checking things off and making sure I quote unquote had a successful day. So I really focused on learning French during this period. I bought lots of French books. I bought a French teacher. I would try to watch TV in French. So I was learning something during this time period. I would do online classes. I was reading a lot of books and kind of checking all the books off that I wanted to read. And I was just making sure I was keeping myself busy and it wasn't just wallowing in my own sorrow or just watching TV and doing nothing else. And I think that's what helped me stay motivated and keep me in the right track.
Right. And before your move to Saint Etienne, you saw possibly the most successful period of your career playing for Torres Calcio, where you won three domestic titles, one Coppa Italian, and three Italian Super Cups. What do you think was the biggest reason behind the continued success of yourself as well as the team in that moment?
We had the best players in the country. No, I mean
Right.
we had the best team in the country. We had the top players. Most of the team was on the Italian national team. And it was also a great place to live, and the quality of life was great. You lived on an island, it was good weather, it was sunshine. So people were really happy. And I think all of those factors counted in.
Right. So at that moment when you are at the top of your career, especially with the entire team being at the top of their careers, how do you stop complacency from creeping in?
From the perspective of that, even though we were winning all the time, there was still a couple teams that were right on our heels. So if we dropped a game, we knew that they would take over. And winning the league was one thing, but being successful in Europe on a whole was another thing. So we did really well nationally, but internationally, we would only make it to the quarterfinals of Champions League. And so we knew that we had to play well in our league in order to improve to try to get farther internationally.
Right. And it was at this moment as well when you represented Italy's national team. I wanted to understand what made you choose Italy over US, knowing that you were born in the US.
US didn't call me. Simple. Italy called me to the full team and the US didn't.
Had they called you, do you think you'd have gone with the US or still sided with Italy?
No, I would have gone to the US.
Knowing that you are a keeper and your role on the field is the most unique because physically you're relatively more stationary than the other players, and yet one mistake in your role can result in a goal directly. With the stakes often being so high for the keepers, how do you ensure that you're concentrating throughout the 90 minutes?
For me personally, I talk a lot. I just keep myself engaged by continuous communication. And so I have to be watching what's happened if I'm communicating. And that's always helped me stay in the game.
And coming back to your team that was so successful for 3 to 4 years at the same time, I wanted to know, while the team will always have collective goals at the beginning of the season, how would you set personal goals for the season? Could you give me an example of some of your goals for this season?
I've always been one that wanted to get shutouts. So shutouts in a row, consistent shutouts, the most shutouts of the league has always been a big one for me. And then also small goals, improving my kicking game, making sure I was coming out farther and farther on crosses and opening that distance for myself and different things like this.
And Now, having decided to retire, I'd love to know the best coach that you trained under and what would you say was the best advice that you got?
There's so many coaches, I would never want to call one out specifically. I don't know if it's the best advice, but it's one of the ones that sticks in my mind the most. And it doesn't have to be pretty, it has to be effective. Because it was also funny, it was my college coach who told me that. But then I went to Italy, and in Italy, it has to be pretty and it has to be effective. Like they really care how it looks. And like it was the only time that my coaches would get mad if I saved it, but it didn't look good. So it was also a culture shock, and it was a way to learn that it's not always that way, which was pretty funny. I think I've had a lot of great coaches, and I think even the bad coaches, I've learned from them of what not to do or how to not interact with people. So I think you can learn something from everybody, and you just have to try to take the good as much as possible.
Right. And coming to, learning from that kind of experiences, what would you say was the most devastating loss in your career?
Easy. The national championships in university when I was 18 years old.
Why would you say that?
Because I made a huge mistake and made ESPN bloopers, and we lost the game. And my coach said that I shot the team in the foot on national television.
Right. And that is the coach that ended up becoming the coach for the national team as well, right?
Correct.
Right. And from that to the other end of the spectrum, what would you say is your favorite sporting memory?
Hopefully this Friday.
Amen for that. I know you care a lot about raising the profile of the women's sport, especially women's football. What do you think the future holds for Arianna now that you have decided to hang up your glove?
I think I know for sure that I'll stay in women's sports, especially women's football. And my objective is to continue working with a consultancy that I've already started to work with to help clubs, federations, stakeholders, sponsors develop the game more, create strategic plans, and start to understand how they can actually get an ROI from women's football and what's the best way to do it, bringing in a bunch of different factors and how women's football can not only grow for the players themselves, but also for the clubs and bring in money for those clubs so that the women's team can stand alone.
Right. And I often try and close the episode trying to know what got the athlete started in the game. And I know that your father in American football. How much of influence would you pay to that in your career?
I mean, my dad was just a college football player. He didn't go that far. So, but he was really athletic. And I think it was just a really close family that really supported each other. And so, whether it was my mom, my sister, or my dad, everybody was my biggest fan growing up. And I've always come to my games. And if the world was different today, I'm sure my mom and sister would be at the game this Friday. Yeah, I don't think it was specifically my dad. I just think it's having a support system behind you and knowing that people are always there for you, and whether you have a good game or you have a bad game, they're going to be there. I think is super important. And it's always been important in my career since I came abroad that my family really supported me. And as soon as I got injured, my mom would come visit. My sister visits all the time. I could always go home if I was having problems. I think the support system was huge and definitely kept me in the game as long as it has.
Right. It's been a real pleasure having you on the episode today, and we really wish you the best of luck for the coming match, and we really hope that you lift the title and end your career on a high.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I hope all your listeners have a great day, and I hope they watch the game on Friday.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Arianna.
Well, it was wonderful talking to Arianna about her immensely successful career and also how she continues to keep her side hustle on as she takes on interesting projects outside the field and continues to drive the agenda of women's sports forward. I wish her the very best for the upcoming game on Friday, 4th June 2021, and hoping that she can hang up her gloves proudly with PSG women's team's first ever league title. As promised, here's more about our partnership with Zenkai Sports, the new disruptor in the performance apparel world. Zenkai utilizes a brand new technology that repels liquids, keeping you cooler during intense activity as the sweat evaporates naturally off your skin. This allows you to regulate body temperature easily and push yourself harder as Zenkai clothing harnesses the power of your sweat. Sweat is our friend, keep it on you. Zenkai Sports is also the only performance apparel company which is cotton based. All of their gear is over 65% cotton, with some pieces over 95%. Cotton is biodegradable, feels great against your skin, and is much better for our environment than synthetic based apparel. Please go to www.zenkaisports.com to check out their cool range of products that can give you that extra boost in your performance, And while you are at it, use the code TGP20 for a 20% discount off your entire order. You can also find all these details in our show notes of this episode, so don't forget to check it out.
So that's it for this episode, folks. Thank you for tuning into the Gifted Podcast. I have been your host, Neeraj Mulani. A gentle reminder, you can find us as The Gifted on your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, and Google. Keep following us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as The Gifted Podcast and on Twitter as The Gifted Pod so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Thank you once again for listening, and I'll see you next week with another special episode. Until then, stay well and keep your masks on.